Pretty incredible. It is pretty incredible when you think about what people can do when they come together. First time I heard about the Amish community was when I moved up to Minnesota. I grew up in southern Texas. There's not very many Amish people. There's a lot of Mexican people, but not very many Amish people. However, the first time that I actually saw the Amish people was actually on a Greyhound bus as I was coming up to Minnesota to visit my fiance. I didn't know anything about them, about their beliefs or their way of living, but after being in Minnesota for 15 years, I have gotten very acquainted with their beliefs and the way that they live, as we have some as neighbors. Our neighbors are here today. Those aren't the Amish ones. They're just a little bit further down the road. But, as many of you already knew, some of the details of how the Amish community operates, and it's not very similar to the way that the outside world operates. They don't operate or own heavy machinery, tools, car, etc. And if you're familiar with the Amish, you might say they find ways around this. Nonetheless, the point is that they don't operate the way that we do. They operate completely different. Before I go any further, I just want you to know that I'm not trying to teach you what the Amish do. There is a point to all this. I'm not telling you to adhere to their beliefs or the life of an Amish, but I think that we are able to learn from the way that they do live. Especially this Amish community in Ohio. They stepped it up a notch. They did something pretty incredible and cool to watch by moving this pole barn building with no heavy equipment machinery, all muscle. That's pretty incredible. As a matter of fact, my son Micah got a pretty good kick out of this video. He's laughing and he's like, "Dad, you should look at this." He's pretty excited to show it to me. But it's neat to see what people can do collectively rather than individually. And this is true of many scenarios. It's not just confined to faith. And here's the thing, we're going to be talking a little bit about how this concept of community is not just for the church. The book of Ecclesiastes does say, though, two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close to each other can keep each other warm, but how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. So, pretty big concepts that are simple to apply. Success is much easier in numbers. And you might just say, we're not talking, that's not what it says. It's like, it's better in numbers. If you stumble in life, it is much easier when someone is there to help you. In isolation, you will grow cold, but warmth can be found in companionship. In a battle, your back is open for attack. In numbers, you are protected and can conquer. People are hard to be broken in numbers because numbers has strength. All the principles that I just mentioned can be applied in many different ways, some that actually don't have any faith at all. You could apply it to a business model. We're better together. A motivational speech, a diet plan, a marriage conference, a coach pep talk. We got to do this together. But I am not your motivational speaker. I'm not here to try to motivate you to success according to the world's eyes. I am here to speak and motivate you to live the life that God has called you to. And for all of us to do it together. That's what Scripture tells us. That we are a community, and that's how the church is formed. These walls do not make up the church. I come in here during the week, and I'm telling you, when the building is empty, the church is not here. It is made up of people. As followers of Jesus Christ, we exist to motivate and encourage each other for greater things than ourselves. To let our lives be something that people are in awe of as they see us move together, united as one, heading in the same direction, accomplishing incredible things, just like in the opening clip. When was the last time that the community looked at a church and said, that is incredible what they are doing as a community of people? I think sadly enough, the answer is, it doesn't happen very often. Community matters because we are able to accomplish more together than individually. And here's the sad part about this today. I believe that when it comes to the community part of the church, Epicenter, this is where we fail. I believe that community is the part that we're missing completely within the church walls. I see that God is moving, transforming lives, and people are being changed by the gospel, which is incredible. That's really cool because that's part of the mission, right? Matthew chapter 28, go and make disciples. Discipleship is being accomplished. I believe that we are putting we're pouring into past, present, and future generations. We're all about reaching the past and future generations. We're doing that. We're doing great. And I know that we have people within these walls that are selfless and they're generous. But the part that we suffer from is the community part of it. We're getting a lot of things right. And if you look at the book of Revelation, which pretty soon we're going to be doing a series on that, sometimes you have to look at the church and say, this is where you're failing. This is where we're not doing a very good job. And community is that for us. Aside from Sunday mornings, community is a foreign concept within the church. We love individualism more than we love community. We love doing our own thing. We just don't love doing things with each other. And I believe that because of our failure to live in community, we struggle to live our faith on our own. The word community can take on many nuances. You know, that you could definitely have many layers to this. Many people, when they hear community, there's many things that come to mind because some of us have families, some of us have friends, and we see community in that way. I have some family members who have a specific friend that always likes to hang out with them, which is great. I think it's incredible. But a while back, we were with these family members, and we had spent the week at their house. We're in their house, and this friend was typically there, you know, with them, hanging out, eating, watching TV, so forth and so on. One night, though, my family and I actually decided to go out, and we came back to their house, and their friend was there, but we didn't see my family, so I'm like, okay, well, we went to the room, we kind of got settled in. I come back, it's later in the evening, and I asked this friend, do you know where my family members are at? It's like, oh yeah, they decided to go to sleep. So he's watching TV, he's sitting there by himself, my family's in the room sleeping, and he's just there, so he finally lets himself out, locks the door, and just heads out the door. And for me, that's kind of weird, you know, I'm like, nobody's awake, you know, you're just kind of hanging out, but for them, that's what they see in community. I'm not asking for you to see this as community. You need to have healthy boundaries to protect your marriage, your kids. You have to have healthy boundaries in a community. But as a church, we have to be a community together. And I want to define what that community looks like. Because I'm not talking about that kind of community where you're just open-ended boundaries. You know, as a matter of fact, when I was thinking about it, our neighbors are here, and I really hope that they don't say that this is me. But, in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 17, it says, don't visit your neighbors too often or you will wear out your welcome. And I'm thinking, hopefully I didn't do that with my neighbors, you know. But, sometimes there's unlimited boundaries. That's not what I'm talking about in community. And the Bible helps us to understand what it means by community. I am talking about being a church community like the Bible talks about in the book of Acts that describes a church where all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper and to prayer. I want to slow down, and I really want you to focus in on this, because most of the time when we read the Bible, we're just kind of reading it, and we just got our devotionals done for the day. It doesn't really matter. I want for us to slow down enough to know what it's saying that we should be. This is describing the early church, and it's telling us this is what we should be. This is after the day of Pentecost. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper and prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. Pretty incredible. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day, the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. It's a passage that really depicts what the church should be doing, and I think that we do a lot of things right. I think when it comes to most of the things that are happening there, we can look at the life of the church and we're missing a lot of it. See, people are devoting themselves to the teachings and to the truth. There's a body of believers that are praying together with each other. They're encouraging each other. A group of individuals that gathers to worship together. Men and women who are selfless and generous with others in the community. And before I go any further, I do want to clarify that when it comes to these aspects that I just mentioned, there are individuals within the church that exhibit these behaviors, and I have the privilege, and I've seen them doing these things and living this way, which is pretty incredible. These are the attributes that some individuals within the church show. Very incredible. But this passage is not confined to the attributes of certain individuals. This is defining what the church is, the entire community. I don't know if you're catching the theme of all of this, but they're doing things together. They're actually spending time with one another. These people met at the temples, but they also met in their homes. They shared meals and enjoyed each other's company. As I think about that part, there's a couple that's not here today, so I could pick on them, but Larry and Ruth Richter, they're incredible with this. They like to pick one couple to take out each Sunday so that they could actually spend time with them and get to know them. I love that. It's happening, but it's happening in small numbers. We are a community of people, and I'm telling you, there are many communities that you can be a part of, but there is only one that can radically change the way that you live, the way that you see life, and that you experience it. The gathering within the church in the book of Acts is telling us that it didn't happen once a week. They met throughout the week. They met each day. And each day, the community grew. That's incredible. If you're an introvert, this sounds painful. Not only being around people, but the group keeps getting larger. I'm an extrovert, so I love this motto and this idea of what what God intended the church to be. But I understand your concern for community if you're an introvert. So I need to give you some reasons as to why it's so important. And even if you're an extrovert, I need to give you some reasons as to why church is important. And the first one is encouragement. We exist to be encouraged, which we're going to be talking about more as we dig into Scripture more and more. A little over 12 years ago, I was hired to lead worship at a camp in Stewartville, Minnesota. If you have no idea where it's at, it's located just 10 miles south of Rochester. So during my time there, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of teens, interact with them, and spend some time praying with them. During these times, we would open up with conversation. We would talk about how life was going, time at the camp, maybe some of the struggles that they had back at home, so forth and so on. But one of the statements that kept on recurring over and over again, it almost became the theme with every teen. And it was that it is so much easier to live for Jesus within the camp than outside the camp. It is easy to live for Christ when they're there, when they're not with friends, when they're not with family, when they're just secluded by themselves within this camp. And it actually took me back to when I was a teenager, because that's the same thing that I said. It's so much easier when I'm at a conference, when I'm at a camp. It just makes it so much easier to live for Christ than when I go back home and I have to be with people that are going to steer me the wrong way. Now, with that being said, the camp was not the cure. The benefit came from the community within the camp. There is something absolutely incredible when people come together, not only to accomplish things, but to encourage one another, which is what was happening. Within that camp, we were encouraging and challenging one another. And, as I was thinking about the word encouraging, because that's another word that can take on many nuances, many ways of interpreting it. For some people, encouragement means that you're going to make me feel good. Let me define the word that is used for encouragement. It is actually parakaleo, which means to call to one side or to summon, to instruct and to teach. See, encouragement doesn't always come from hearing what you want to hear. It's from teaching you so that you can keep on moving in the way that you have to go. That is what encouragement is. And the funny thing is about that word, parakaleo, when the Bible talks about the Holy Spirit, the word that is used there is parakleto, which is actually the paraclete, which means to come alongside. That is what the community should be doing, is coming alongside of each other and saying, we're going to get through this together, and we're here to teach and instruct each other to keep on moving forward. And when we're at that camp, that is exactly what is happening. We are teaching and encouraging one another. Within the camp, the struggle still exists. Within the camp, there is still friction, people that hate each other. They have friends there that they can't stand. But the beauty of it is that they make themselves vulnerable and they're transparent about the things that they're going through. I think that this is something that the teens do really well, and as adults we fail at. We don't want to be vulnerable to anyone. But there at the camp, there was an encouragement that, you know what, you could be vulnerable, but we're going to keep on moving along in this. We're going to teach you how to live for Christ. The reason that it was so hard to go back home and to live for Jesus when I was younger, after we came back from the missions trips, conferences, youth rallies, it was because I spent more time with other communities of friends that encouraged me to do all the wrong things and secluded myself from the church community that encouraged me to live like Christ. That's why it was hard to live for Christ, because I was surrounding myself with people that weren't leading me in the right direction. And I'm not suggesting that you should not have friends outside of the church. That's not what I'm saying. But the camp and community that you surround yourself with the most will ultimately influence the things that you're chasing after and the way that you're thinking. Living in community within the church is extremely important. And as followers of Jesus Christ, the book of Hebrews actually tells us this: let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. I want to pause right there because I know of different people that they're like, well, I don't go to a church per se, but I meet with people that are Christian to encourage one another. Let me go back to Acts chapter 2 and what it said. They met where? At the temple and at each other's homes. We are to come together as a community to gather, and yes, this isn't it. We're supposed to gather throughout the week, but the importance of a church gathering is extremely important, which is what Hebrews is telling us. Don't neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage, instruct, teach, come alongside each other, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Don't neglect the coming together, the gathering, the community, as some people do, but encourage one another. Church, life is difficult enough the way that it is. And, you know, we've had things in our lives, my wife and I and our family, we've had things in our lives that are very difficult to go on our own. And we've developed meaningful relationships because of it. I was scrolling through my pictures the other day on my phone, and you know, my son Alistair was in St. Cloud a while back, and I saw a picture of our friends, the Lawrence family, the Lawrences. You know, they were there with us. They came and visited us. They spent time with us. They took us out to eat. They encouraged us. That is what a community does. They do life together. We were created to be in relationship with God and to establish relationships with one another. That is why the church exists. So that when you find yourself at a loss with life, you have someone that can pray with you, encourage you, and you don't have to wait till Sunday to come back and be encouraged and prayed over. So then when you're struggling with things, with sin or questions in life and your faith, you can meet people that will point you back to the Bible. Not their opinion, not their thoughts on life, but to point you back to the book that is guiding you and leading you in this life. To continue to press on in the midst of difficulty and continue to run the race set before you. There are many types of communities in our society. Many that you could surround yourself with, and some that are actually kind of good. Communities advocating for change and action, communities of friends, communities for activities, communities of families. You can live in community, fellowship with many people who have similar interests, attitudes, goals, and or characteristics. But the question is, how beneficial is that community in light of what your life is and in light of eternity? It could be good, but is it the best thing you could be doing? That is one thing that you have to ask yourself. With the people that you're surrounding yourself, is that the best thing for your life? Not the good thing. There's many good things, but is it the best thing? Because you see, the enemy can actually establish communities that have a purpose in advocating for a good cause, but it will deprive you of the mission. You could be doing good things, but it's not the great thing. When there was a quote that I read in a book, and it said, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll keep you busy. The enemy can keep you busy to deprive you of mission. It's very simple. He's not always going to use evil into your life to deprive you from relationship with God. There are many things that he can do to pull you away from the things that you should be doing. And the enemy can keep us busy doing good things that deprive us of our purpose, which is another reason that the community exists. It's for purpose. God filled us with purpose. He gave us purpose. We're not people that just randomly came to be out of, an explosion and everything just kind of gathered together perfectly. We were created with a purpose by our Creator. About a month and a half ago, I was watching this show with my wife, and it was about different pastors. Whenever I talk about this, I feel like people think that I just sit down and watch podcasts of pastors. That's not all I do. I watch the Discovery Channel and history as well. But, we were sitting down watching this show, and it was about pastors getting together and hashing out different things that they disagreed on, and maybe some that they'd agreed on. But they had pretty interesting topics and discussion. One of the segments, they talked about compassion and the works. Compassion and works came up, if they're important. The topic really boiled down to this. This was actually the question. It was, do faith-based organizations that go in for relief efforts, during disaster or poverty, is that really the reason that the church exists? Is that what we're about? Ministries that go and offer water, food, clothing, education, etc. So I just want to give you the answer so you're not kind of thinking that I'm going to go off on on the wrong direction. But the answer, of course, was yes. This is important. We think that there is value. The two individuals that were in the hot seat were Greg Laurie and David Platt. Great pastors, great speakers. But, they're talking about this, and they're saying, of course, it's good. We're actually called to do this in the Bible, to feed the hungry, to clothe those in need. The question, however, came down to, is this ultimately the most effective thing that the church could and should be doing? Is compassion without the gospel the work that the church should be doing? Let me repeat that. Is doing good things without the gospel behind it or in front of it, is that the most important thing that the church should be doing? What is the mission of the church? It is to share the gospel. So what is the most important thing? To extend compassion or to share the gospel? And that doesn't mean that you can't do both, but when you deprive compassion without gospel, there is something wrong. The life-changing message of Jesus Christ is what is the most important for us, and that is our mission. That is our purpose. The message that can meet people where they are at spiritually, physically, socially, geographically, and give them hope through the work that Jesus did through his death and his resurrection, guidance for this life, and calling us to the life that he guides us in through his word, to find comfort in him, provision in him, love in him, and strength and grace to face today or whatever tomorrow brings. And we understand that we can endure all these things because his grace is sufficient for our difficulties. As we look at Corinthians, Paul says that he begged 3 times for the thorn in his flesh to be taken aside, and the Lord responded by saying, "My grace is sufficient." See, we always look at grace as something that is only for the good. It's also for the bad, to get us through the difficult times. No doubt that the Bible calls us to feed the hungry and to clothe the poor, to care for the orphans and the widows. That's what James talks about, right? True and genuine religion in the sight of God is caring for orphans and for widows. That's what he says. These are acts of love and good works that we should be motivating each other to do, like Hebrews said. Motivating each other to do these things that we're called to do. But those works are the overflow of our faith. That is what James says. Show me your faith and I'll show you my deeds by my faith. See, they both work hand in hand. You can't say, I'm just going to do good things because that's what God calls me to do. No, faith has to come first so that we can actually do the rest of it. Our purpose is to share the gospel that can change people. But the works are revealing the faith that is at work within us. Our purpose as a church is sharing the gospel that leads us to acts of love and compassion. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't accomplish this outside of the church, but it can be more easily accomplished together as each person serves their function. You can have an impact individually, like I mentioned last week, but it's different. See, last week we talked about how an individual can create ripples. Every single life matters. We talked about the gift of life from the mother's womb. It is important to value every single life because a life can create ripples just like this pebble. It can actually send waves outside from there. That's what one life can do, and it's incredible. But when many lives come together to do something incredible, the power is pretty incredible. It can't be contained. You can't keep it inside. It is going to do something incredible because a lot of people are coming together, and just like you saw that shed being moved, that is the power of people collectively coming together, moving in the same direction. And I'm telling you, this is the part that we're failing at the most. We don't know how to live with each other. We don't know how to do community. There is nothing awe-inspiring when individuals can't come together for the same mission. When we are filled with purpose. You can create a ripple outside in the community on your own. But I am telling you that when we are united together in purpose, we are unstoppable. There is a power that is incredible when that happens. The purpose of the church is to reach people with the gospel that can change their lives. If you want to care for the poor, you can do that. But share the gospel that will change their perspective of what they're going through. If you want to share the gospel with somebody in prison, you can do that on your own. And yes, I applaud you for that. But I'm telling you, you could just go and visit them, but without sharing the gospel, they have no idea of transformation. The gospel has to be our purpose. And each of us coming together to reach further and further by using our gifts, abilities, and our acts of love to share Christ with people and to bring him glory, which is what 1 Peter 4 states. Most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. You know what? If you've got something against somebody here you go. Living in community is difficult, which is the reason that it's telling us, most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. Learn how to deal with each other. Cheerfully, share your home with those in need of a meal or a place to stay. Hospitality. God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. Do you have the gift of speaking? Then speak as though God himself were speaking through you. Do you have the gift of helping others? Do it with all the strength and energy that God supplies. Then everything you do will bring glory to God through Jesus Christ. It's not for me. It's not for my benefit. It's for the benefit of the church and for the glory of God. All glory and power to him forever and ever. Amen. This is all about him. You know, and really quickly, just to kind of point something out of the deprivation of community, this morning, nursery is not going on. And this is not a guilt trip. I'm just simply saying, when we don't have a community to gather and to carry out the mission, certain individuals suffer because everything falls back to them. There is something incredible about community. We can accomplish more together. This is not about a guilt trip. This is not about making people feel bad. This is about saying, if we could come together, we can move mountains. Because we are doing it and moving in the same direction together. Our purpose individually is best accented in community. In the opening clip, you see men of different ages with different strengths, different stages of life and wisdom, but each individual brings a strength that lightens the load for the rest of the community. Hear me out. Regardless of your age bracket, whether you feel like you're too old or you're too young, we look at Timothy and it says, you know what? Don't let anyone look down upon you for being young. If you're older, you have wisdom to offer. You are not unable to help us move forward. God created you uniquely with purpose and gave you that purpose to help move the church along. The church is composed of people, and Jesus died for those people. Jesus died for the church, which is what Ephesians 5 tells us. The church community is important, and it has a mission to accomplish. If you don't see the value in church, then you can't see the value of why Jesus died for it. We are a community that recognizes our need for Jesus and that we need each other for encouragement when life gets difficult. We come together because we are better as we unite to accomplish our purpose. And the other reason, the final reason that I want to give you today that the church exists is written all over the Bible from beginning all the way to the cross, from the moment of creation to the cross. And it is because we were created for relationship, which it's not coming up there. That's the last point, relationship. In the garden, we learned that God created us to be in community with him, right? We see it right away in Genesis. He creates a woman as a counterpart for the man to be in relationship with. The 10 Commandments are given to Moses, and Jesus summarizes them in Mark 12:30. He says that we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. The first part of it is a relationship with Christ as to what it should look like. The second part of it is a relationship with each other. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus dies at the cross to forgive the debt that we could not pay, to make a way back to the Father. Why? So that we could be in right relationship with him again. Are you catching the theme? We're relational beings. When we stay away from the church, we're staying away from the very thing that is supposed to be helping us to get through life. Church, we were created beings that were meant to be in relationship. Unfortunately, this is the part that most of us evade the most. Because relationships are tough. They're messy. If you're married, you understand. Relationships are messy. I give it to my wife. She's put up with me for 15 years. And for many more, till death do us part. We may not neglect going to church services on Sunday, but we avoid the church people the rest of the week. One of the greatest gifts, once again, that I have been given within the church is the gift of community. When I moved from Texas up north, I left my biological family behind. We still have close enough family to us. You know, my wife's family lives close to us, which is great. We love and appreciate them. In the midst of our faith journey, though, we have been called to North Dakota. We were in Brainerd for a while, and you know, we didn't have anyone that we knew. And our church family was who we pressed on to, and it's incredible. And I'll tell you that I have friends within the church that there's no distinction between my family in Texas and them being family here. You know, we might have different skin color, we might have different eye color, besides Andrian, you know. She's Mexican, so we look exactly the same. She's my cousin, actually. No, I'm just kidding. You know, but we look different. But I'm telling you that with some friends, there is no difference. I would do anything for them because they are family. And I remember hearing that term when I was younger, church family. I just thought it was the corniest and weirdest thing ever. But I'm telling you, now I've learned the value of it. There are people within this church that have helped me get through the times of doubt and frustration, that have encouraged me, that have come alongside of me, and there is a bond so deep that they are like family. Put it this way, in the book of Mark, it says that Jesus' mother and brothers came to see him. They stood outside and sent word for him to come and talk with them. There was a crowd sitting around Jesus, and someone said, "Your mother and your brothers are outside asking for you." Jesus replied, "Who is my mother? Who are my brothers?" Then he looked at those around him and said, "Look, these are my mother and brothers. Anyone who does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." We're talking about family. People here within the church, they are my family. Because we're living in community together, heading in the same direction. We are here to encourage one another. We're filled with purpose, and we're moving in the same direction in relationship. And church, I pray that we'll be a community that is as close as family. That there will be this bond that is no different than any other family member. That it will go past blood, and that there will be a spiritual bond that connects us. I'm not talking about a dysfunctional family, but one that is encouraging one another, driven by purpose and connected by relationship. And I'm asking, be part of the life and the ministry of Epicenter. Sunday morning is not enough. If you're listening online, it is not enough. You are depriving yourself of relationship. and eventually you will suffer for it. You might have family. That's fine. Family is great. I love my in-laws. But at the same time, I'm telling you, there has to be more. People that are united in purpose, heading in the same direction. If you've stayed in the outskirts of church community, I actually want to invite you today to be a part of our community. Maybe it's your first time here. Maybe you've come to Epicenter for a while and you really haven't done anything. Tonight we have our game night. This is a time where we're just getting together to spend time with each other, to laugh, and we have a great time. And we typically, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but we typically have the same people show up to these things. And I love those people. It's great. But at the same time, we want to get to know other people outside of Sunday morning. Be a part of that. I understand that there are many things that you could be doing, and maybe you can't show up tonight, so I want to put you on the spot, and I want to give you an opportunity to be a part of it within the next 30 minutes. And here's how I want you to do this. I want to encourage you to come and have pie with us. Sounds weird, but I want you to spend some time with us. As a church, we want to invite you to have pie and ice cream with us at Larry's Pizza. We've already paid for the pie. We've already paid for the ice cream. We've already, our office admin, Jody, has already reserved a space for us to meet in and to spend time together. I'm not asking you, which would be great, but I'm not asking you to go to a Bible study. I'm simply asking you, would you be willing to spend 20, 30 minutes? You could order whatever you want at Larry's. We're not paying for that. We're paying for the pie. But, you could order whatever you want for food and come and sit down with us, enjoy a meal. But we're just providing pie for you. Then that way, if you don't want to purchase anything else, at least you have something to eat. And just spend time with us. We're supposed to be a community. I think we should be able to tolerate each other a little bit more than just an hour on Sundays. Whether it's your first time here or you call Epicenter Church, I'm personally inviting you. Spend time with us. Be part of our community. And help us to be a body that is an unstoppable force. Be a part of a community that is here to encourage you and challenge you to be more like Christ, that is driven by purpose and wants to live in a relationship with God and with one another. Let's pray.